Welcome to Fill the Void podcast, where we discuss unhealthy human habits caused by the society of consumption. Welcome to Fill the Void podcast, where we dive into conversations that challenge perspectives and promote understanding. Today, we have a truly remarkable guest who has not only emerged as a healed survivor of childhood trauma-induced PTSD, but has also become a passionate advocate for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Our guest is Jill Sitnik, a powerful voice in the realm of mental health, ready to share her personal story and insights into how psychedelic therapy played a pivotal role in her healing process. Jill is on a mission to combat the stigma surrounding psychedelics by explaining her experiences and shedding light on the value of this unconventional healing modality. Not only Jill shared her story, but she has taken this a step further, creating a memoir, a practical workbook, and a YouTube channel. Please join me in welcoming Jill to the podcast. Hi, Jill. How's it going?
Hello. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. And first of all, I want you to start by telling us a little bit about your story. And I want you to talk about your father and your childhood. How does this trauma started?
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I think the fastest summary of my childhood is physical abuse, mental abuse, depression, drugs, suicide. I think that all kind of rotated. My father was a 6 foot to 250 pound domestic abuser. My mother was clinically depressed her entire life. And through my age, 0 to 5, had tried to commit suicide multiple times. One of the last times she tried to shoot herself. And that's one of the major traumas I had when I was 5. My life has always been kind of before the shotgun and after the shotgun. And
Yeah.
after the shotgun, there was lots of moving me around, not really stable housing, not really stable food, still with the emotional and the physical abuse when I actually went to live with him later on. And I will then say a big giant but. But uh, we didn't really understand trauma per se back then. And I was just kind of thought I had a rotten childhood and just kind of thought I was always going to be an anxious, over productivity person, like super, super type A. I wound up being in a lovely long term relationship over 20 years with my partner, Carl, and he regulated my nervous system. Everything was going to be okay. Everything was safe. So I never even thought to kind of deal with my childhood. What was there to deal with? Well, Carl passed away, and 18 months after his passing, when the widow's fog was kind of dwindling down, I had a massive panic attack from a work email that was like level 1, but my body was I just started flipping out. My system was upset, my shoulders were up to my neck. I was not sleeping, I wasn't eating well. I was 1,000% sure that my life as it was gonna come to an end. I was gonna lose my job, never be able to get another job. I was gonna lose my house. I was gonna be living in my car with my pets. Like, I just had this outrageous depression and absolute sure and certainty that my life was going to end. And so I went to my therapist who had helped me with my grief work. And for the first time, we started talking about my childhood because she said to me, well, if your body is giving the symptoms, and I always do this because my shoulders were up to here. So
Yeah.
whenever I do this, I'm talking about like my body being reliving some trauma in some way. And I started to tell her about my childhood, and, one of the jokes I say to her all the time is I saw her raised eyebrows with some of my stories and said, "Okay, I might be onto something." And, so she diagnosed me with the PTSD. I argued, totally argued. I'm like, "Have you met me? I'm super productive. I'm adulting. What's going on?" But ultimately, I was diagnosed with PTSD from the childhood trauma that I had never resolved. She was in a program to become a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist. She said, take a look at the research that's on MAPS.org, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I did all that. I saw the potential to heal, and I decided to work with her and a guide. And 3 therapeutic journeys later with MDMA, I then no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. So that's kind
Wow,
of the big summary.
your story is incredible. I have so many questions to do,
Go ahead.
but let's go in order. First of all, could you go in detail also like with the story with your mom?
So I believe one of the things that happens with MDMA therapy is that I, as a trauma patient, I always have to say, as a trauma patient, I started to have empathy towards my parents that I had never had before. And now I look at my mother and her behavior, and she has passed.
Because at the beginning you're angry, right? You have like feelings of anger towards your parents.
Anger, fear, but like my mother was clinically depressed probably when she married my father, and things just went south from there. One of the major healing reframes, I always thought my mother was trying to get away. She was abandoning me. She was leaving me with him. Look, my throat gets, I still get kind of, one of the healing reframes was that I realized she was just trying to escape. She was
Yeah.
the one getting beaten way more than I was as a little baby. And I really feel sorry for my mother. One of the reasons why I'm talking so openly about psychedelics for mental health is that I firmly believe if this therapy had been around when she was alive, her life could have been different.
Yeah, it's so remarkable that you're like an activist towards this movement because it really could change people's lives. So yes, thank you for doing all this. And so you discovered the psychedelic assisted therapy through the
Uh-huh.
therapist
Yep.
that and when they diagnosed you with PTSD, it was hard for you to accept because like I had my issues, and when they tell you like, oh, you're an addict, for example, in my case, you're like, no. How did you deal with that?
Right. Oh, I totally argued.
It's like a
Yeah.
process that we have to
Uh
go through.
You know what? To be honest with you, and I write this in the book. This cracked me up because I really did argue with her. I was like, I'm an active adult. I'm doing everything right. And no, I think I had in my head that PTSD just shuts people down. And that's not true. You can absolutely function and still feel like the world is going to come to an end. So I think it was my lack of understanding what PTSD really was. And then she had me read the book. The Body Keeps a Score, forgive me for having to think there for a second, Vanderkolk, and The Body Keeps a Score for me was brand new information that my body was communicating to me the trauma I was feeling as a 3-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as a 10-year-old. That was my body remembered that trauma, even though my subconscious had it so deeply buried. So, yeah, I had to do some homework. I had to do some reading, and that's how she
Yeah.
convinced me.
And like, so that's how you started being aware of this. But how did this trauma manifest?
Oh my gosh. I'll ask you a question. What color do you see your future? What color is out there?
Mine, personally, I see purple.
I saw black. When I was asked that question in the midst of my PTSD, all I saw was darkness. I saw no future. I felt like I was running a race with 100-pound sack on my back that I could never win. It was a sense of lack of control, a sense of constant fear. Think about a toddler or a 3 to 5-year-old-ish, because that's where a lot of the beatings for me kind of happened at that timeline. Think of the fear that that little child is living in. That's how my body was reacting at 47 with the PTSD.
Wow, yeah, yeah. I see it. I see it, and it's wow, it's crazy. And what does healing the trauma mean? Like after these therapies, what does healing a trauma mean?
That is a fantastic question because it level sets the expectations. I still have all of my memories. Life wasn't great. None of that changed. The healing of the trauma is the 3-year-old, and I just keep coming kind of come back to that 3-year-old. The 3-year-old being beaten up by her father, she internalized the universe is dangerous because little children can't figure out that their caregivers aren't good enough because that would just be they just can't do it. So instead of my father is an awful person beating up a little kid, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing a good enough job. And the universe is a scary place because I never really know when my dad's going to start beating me and hitting me. I mean, that's one of the things with domestic abusers. You never really know when it's coming. The healing, the very specific healing, is that MDMA allows a trauma patient to see that memory almost like it's over here, like it's on TV,
Like
like it's a
like
movie.
dissociating yourself
You're
from.
dis yes, yes. And when you see that's a great yes. And when you see that memory suddenly from a 47-year perspective, uh, you suddenly see, no, that 3-year-old, the universe was not against that 3-year-old. That 3-year-old did nothing wrong. That was an abusive parent. And by going back and thinking through those memories and reframing the body's interpretation, suddenly I can look back on those beatings of one very specific time that's always in my head. And I'm talking about it right now. My body's not freaking out. That's the healing. So I think it's really important to level set expectations. Life is not a bunch of daisies or, life still happened, but I no longer have a trauma response thinking about that stuff.
And also this trauma, like when that you have since being very young, does was it also manifesting in your relationships, or it was only like a physical pain that you were feeling, or it also affected the relationships that you were like with your partner or with friends?
Um, I would say that my trauma evidenced itself relationally through people pleasing and absolutely through helping. My very first career, I was a teacher. I still love it when I see the light bulb go off with other folks. I'm inherently a teacher. I'm very mission driven, but I always knew I wasn't good enough on my own. I had to produce and help people, or there had to be an excuse that someone would want to spend time with me. We would kind of claim they were self-esteem issues when in really realization it in reality, I'm sorry, in reality, it was a core fundamental belief that had been created out of trauma that I never would have known about if I hadn't started to go through this therapy.
And can you describe like how did MDMA help you heal, specifically giving me examples of what you went through, and like specifically what were the things that it helped you heal?
So, what everybody wants to believe is that it's 10 hours, I'm sorry, it's 10 years of therapy in 8 hours because your therapeutic journey can last anywhere from 5 to 8 hours ish, depending on how things are going. And people very much want me to talk about, something in the journey that really led to healing. Look, in a therapeutic journey of the 5 to 8 hours, on average, I remembered 45-ish minutes. I would al
Ah,
I would always wake up or, like, kind of get out of the enhanced state, like, shocked that, 5, 6 hours have gone by. So what I'll say instead was the much more pragmatic process, and that would be, for me, I'm terrible at meditating, but I'm great at walking my dog and letting my mind drift. So it's my way of meditating.
same here.
Yeah, right? So and Sadie is sleeping right down here, so I would take Sadie for a walk, and I would just kind of relax my mind, and I would have these childhood memories come up, not in order of age, and sometimes they'd come up, like, 2 or 3 of them at a time if they had a common theme. For instance, there was one time where I had 3 childhood memories pop up, and the general theme was that I was 2nd. I was never 1st. My parents never put me first, which I know sounds a little childish, but your parents never telling you that you get to be first means that your entire life you just assume second place. And it manifests in a variety of different ways, especially career. If you're not kind of like pro yourself and you're just like, no, I always deserve second place. So it's called integration. After the MDMA therapy, the days, weeks, and months were full of me looking at different memories that came to my mind when I was relaxed and kind of, is that really the way it happened? And rethinking them, all because my body was not flipping out. And when I got to the end of an integration period, so like my first journey was September, by like November, my body was still acting up. I wasn't getting any more of those memories to reframe. It was kind of like, how caffeine gets you really hyped up and you do
Yeah.
a whole lot of stuff and then it kind of eases down.
Hmm.
So same kind of way. And that's how I knew, since I still had the fear of the universe being against me and my body was still flipping out. That's how I knew that I was ready for a second journey for then more memories to get healed.
And
How's it sounding?
yeah, no, I follow everything perfectly. And
Okay.
how, when these memories pop up, do you have somebody that you talk about these memories with the therapist? Like you go weekly? How was the program?
My therapist and I are pretty casual. I would say that when I needed her weekly, we were weekly, but most of the time it was every other week for me because integration is absolutely it's like physical therapy. Like you're actively getting better and you can feel it. So my therapy sessions, which were vital, absolutely vital. Don't get me wrong. I'm kind of being casual about it because that's how my relationship is with my therapist. But psychotherapy was vital to my healing because what I did was I brought to her the things that I couldn't click. Like, okay, this has been in my head for a while. I'm a little blocked. And that's when the talking really helped.
Got it. And when you say journey, what do you mean by journey?
Oh
First
my
journey
gosh.
or second journey?
So when you're talking about psychedelics in a therapeutic way, use the word journey. When you're talking about psychedelics in a recreational way, use the term trip. And that's usually the easiest way I can know kind of the direction that the conversation is going if someone's talking about a healing journey versus a, hey, we hung out by the lake and had a
Exactly.
recreational trip.
Got it. So you did one first journey which was 6 hours, and then after a month you decided you were ready to do a second one.
No,
Or
no,
uh,
no. Yeah, no. My September first journey and 3 months of talk therapy leading up to that. The day of the journey. My next journey was not until December. I was
okay.
doing a ton of integration and knew in November
How
that I
is
was ready
the
for another one.
process? Yeah, the process of integration, it's like
Yeah.
really key in this process, right?
Hands down. Yes. Yes. I think
Um,
having supportive people and putting the time in is vital. This therapy is work. I hate to tell
yeah.
people it's not a magic, it's not turnkey, it's work.
And how is the MDMA supplied in a pill, in a form of a pill?
Yeah, I just took 2 capsules according to my dosage.
Ah, okay, that's
Yeah.
perfect. And so how, like, building the support system is really key, like you were saying in the healing journey. How did you find or create a supportive environment for your experiences?
Yeah, so I'm laughing because trust me when I say to you that my friends were shocked. I would be the
Okay.
last person to be talking about psychedelics, and so when I told my friends that
Yeah,
I'm embarking on this therapy, I basically had to use a lot of analogies to explain. So, like wrinkles in a shirt is the trauma on your memories. The process of doing the dishes, the water is the integration. The washing the dishes, the integration. The dish soap is the psychedelic. You need that psychedelic to like really scrape off the grime. The TV set. I found that so my friends were super supportive very doubtful. We had all been fed the 80s lines of, for me, the 80s of the egg in the frying pan. So there was definitely a little bit of a Jill, are you sure? But really, I just used analogies to kind of explain how the healing was happening, and they were seeing it. I was actively changing over the course of that year. And so they could actually see it in me and hear it in my conversation. So it was pretty easy to get people supporting me.
Nice. I like that exercise of the analogies. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And did you also do treatment with ketamine or psilocybin? How do these treatments differ from MDMA? And what
Yeah.
are the differences between each treatment?
So let me just clarify. I'm not a doctor. I have no expertise in anything other than my experience.
Mm-hmm.
My first two journeys were regular, just pure MDMA, and empathogen makes you more connected. The third journey, so my second journey was December. My third journey wasn't until next June because come March, I had this awful dream. I won't go into it. Uh, but in working through what this dream meant from March, April, May, June, my doctors were a little, and I say doctors, guides, and therapists
Mm-hmm.
interchangeably. It's the way I can think of them. They were a little concerned that I had a major trauma point, and we talked about the idea of a little bit of psilocybin during my third journey, and that's wound up happening. So MDMA, 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 and a little bit of psilocybin in the third journey. And it was that summer. So that last journey was in June. The end of that summer was when I no longer qualified for a diagnosis. So I've had other experiences, not with ketamine. I've had other experiences at retreats and, working through. I still had some other trauma. My doctors worked with me
Mm-hmm.
two other times, which was lovely with them to do that for me. Um, because healing PTSD doesn't mean you've healed all your trauma. It just means you're no longer kind of suicidal and controlled by
Yeah,
your trauma. Um, but the research, I mean, ketamine is legal now and it's being used to treat depression. So there's lots of companies that are working with that. Johns Hopkins University has the FDA breakthrough designation for psilocybin for depression, anxiety. That's where you're seeing a lot of the research coming out about like end of life anxiety being treated with psilocybin. Whereas MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, they have the FDA breakthrough designation for MDMA for PTSD with potential approval in 2024. It should be coming up.
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And can you now talk about your workbook, Rescuing Jill? That what are the intention prompts that you show and how do they work?
Yes. So I wrote the workbook because I went to a Mexican retreat, which was lovely, and I saw people were very disappointed because, frankly, they didn't go into the journeys well prepared. So whenever you talk about psychedelics, you hear about set and setting, mindset, and setting where you are. The
Yeah.
mindset for a therapeutic journey, and even a recreational one, but definitely therapeutic, is all about what are you looking to heal? What are you looking to stop feeling like my intentions were all about fear. I was so tired of being scared when the universe had really not given me anything to be scared about once I left my father, kind of thing. So intentions are all about where you want the prescribed psychedelic to kind of focus it, and it just I think it moves things along faster. To be honest with you, it's almost like the warm up before a workout. It's kind of the way I describe it a
Yes.
little bit. Um, the workbook has 8 prompts. So people have said to me, "Well, I don't even know how to even start." Basically, you're almost talking to my therapist when you're looking at the workbook because these are the kinds of questions that she asked me along with my symptoms. And, I wrote out my example. This is, the body prompt is a great one. Where in your body are you feeling something? Let's really focus in on that physical sensation and what comes to mind. And that body prompt was used all the time, is probably the easiest to access, and it's a free download on my website. Anybody can get it because I think It's the easiest way for trauma patients to kind of start thinking about intentions. The dream is a good one, a belief you have about yourself. So there's 8 of them in there, and it's kind of like a if you've never worked with psychedelics, you've never worked with intentions, it's a book you can use the first time, you can use it the 5th time, and I just thought that people should know a little bit about the process of therapeutic healing when even if they're heading down to Peru and they're going for a
Yeah.
1-week retreat, like, they deserve to have that information.
Yeah, no, no, this is incredible. And even like you said, registering where the pain or the feeling is in the body is the first step of awareness to be able to do something about it.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of psychedelic therapy heading, both in terms of public perception and potential integration into mainstream mental health practices?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a Berkeley study, the Berkeley Center for Psychedelics, and I'm sure I have butchered that name, but they're doing a lot of great work. Michael Pollan is associated with them. And according to their research, they had a research study on reaching out to voting age people in the US. It was a small sampling, but on average, like 50% of the people were like, absolutely no way psychedelics. And 50% were kind of like, hey, this sounds a little bit interesting. So it's pretty clear to me that if you aren't following the work that's being done in the psychedelic space for mental health, you really don't know what's going on. Me, it's all over my LinkedIn feed, my Facebook feed, like it's everywhere. But
Yeah.
that's because I'm paying attention to it. Uh, I'm really hoping that we do have MDMA for PTSD approval by the FDA in 2024. Then the DEA has to reschedule the MDMA from a Schedule 1 drug to something different. And then the states have to figure out how to manage this kind of treatment. We're going to need a bunch is the technical term, a bunch of trained practitioners who understand this kind of healing modality. So I think we have some steps to get through until it's available in the public, which is why I know a lot of people are heading down to retreats right now to kind of at least get some sort of psychedelic treatment. And I think we're going to find if you look at all the venture capitalists, if you're looking at all the research, all the venture capitalists, everybody is trying to come up with their own compound or delivery system, like a patch, as opposed to having to,
Ah, wow.
ingest mushrooms. Like lots of people, you can't patent things that are out in nature, but you can patent how they get delivered.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of money going into how can we have an MDMA therapeutic journey, but make it 3 hours instead of 7 hours? So there's a lot of research that's happening right now that's going to continue to refine what we know about this healing modality. So in answering your question, I don't know exactly where it's going, and I know we're kind of taking one step at a time right now, but in like 10 years, there should be a bunch of different healing modalities that we currently don't have right now. At least that's my hope. That's one of the reasons why I speak up.
Yeah. And for people that may be considering right now to explore psychedelic therapy, what advice do you have for them? And what should they know before embarking in this journey?
Okay, well, I don't want to be like a car salesman, but that's why I wrote the workbook. Because quite frankly, I have a lot of people who I've learned an awful lot about people's backgrounds, and there are some people that are just they're like me. I was desperate. And there's a lot of people that are desperate right now that are actively searching for any sort of treatment. I would say probably first and foremost, make sure you know who you're working with. You trust who you're working with. Um, if you're heading down to a retreat or something, maybe you take a friend with you so that you know that you've got someone you can trust with you. Safety is super important, knowing who you're working with, understanding that the compounds that you might be ingesting are safe, super, super important. And then just really understanding what you're trying to heal or what you're trying to understand about yourself and being patient with yourself. Psychedelic work is sometimes our minds tell us stuff that we don't necessarily like. And so it can be a little
Yeah.
challenging. I would say empathy and patience for yourself
Yeah.
through the
Empathy and
process.
compassion to ourselves. We're always
Yeah.
judging ourselves. even in our
Ugh,
heads.
so much,
Yeah.
so much.
So thank you, Jill. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It
Such a
was a
pleasure.
pleasure being here. Yes,
Incredible. Thank you for all these remarkable and incredible insights. I know it will be really super helpful for a lot of people.
I hope so. That's the goal.
Thank you.